Do you remember the first riff of Back in Black blasting from the radio? Or that night you and your friends screamed along the highway to hell in a bar, feeling like the whole world was burning beneath your feet? AC/DC isn't just a band. They are the blazing fire of youth, the fierce heartbeat pounding in the chests of millions who love rock and roll. But have you ever wondered, behind those immortal anthems, what really happened? Two small brothers from Scotland, Malcolm and Angus Young, were knocked down by life without mercy. And yet, they got back up, keeping the fire of rock and roll burning to this day. But what truly happened in the shadows behind the scenes? We are about to embark on a journey through AC/DC, not just to relive the songs you know by heart, but to face the scars, the sweat mixed with tears, and the dark secrets so shocking you'll ask yourself, how did they survive? Everything will be revealed in this video. You gotta keep the flame alive, no matter how cold the wind blows. Close your eyes for a moment, and imagine yourself standing in an old street in Glasgow, Scotland, in the 1950s. The air is thick with coal smoke from heavy industry. The sky is as gray as an unshakable sorrow, and the freezing wind cuts through every layer of clothing. For a large family like the Youngs, life was anything but easy. They weren't the only family struggling to survive in the aftermath of war, but it was in that hardship that the spirit of extraordinary people was forged. Their father, William Young, a shipyard worker, and their mother, Margaret, a strong-willed woman, raised 8 children through those tough times. Then, in 1963, they made a bold decision. Much like our ancestors who crossed the Atlantic, leaving behind their old homeland with nothing but the American dream in their suitcases, the Young family took a leap of faith and moved to faraway Australia. It was a journey of more than 10,000 miles. Not just carrying luggage, but carrying hopes for a better, brighter future. In the working-class suburbs of Sydney, 2 small boys, Malcolm and Angus Young, began a journey no one could have predicted. In cramped rented rooms, through nights without electricity or television, they found their light in music. An old guitar became their closest friend. And every time they plucked its strings, they escaped the harsh reality surrounding them. Their music wasn't just sound, it was the fire that kept their souls warm through the darkest days. It gave them hope, an escape, and eventually, a purpose. Malcolm, the quiet yet sharp-minded older brother, had an instinct for music. Angus, small and mischievous, carried an endless supply of energy. They had no money, no connections, no one to lift them up. But they had something money couldn't buy, a burning passion and an unbreakable spirit. In 1973, the 2 brothers decided to name their band AC/DC, inspired by the label on the back of their sister's sewing machine. They had no idea that their first notes would one day echo across the world, from Sydney to the grandest stages in America. At the time, they were just young men playing in tiny bars, where the audience could be counted on one hand, but they played as if they were performing for thousands. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and a whole lot of noise. Angus Young once said, "Their story began just like millions of immigrants who set foot in America, with nothing in their hands but an unshakable will to rise and a dream of living as their true selves." But from those humble beginnings, a legend was born. From a humble beginning, with a burning guitar in the hands of 2 immigrant kids, AC/DC slowly stepped into the light. But it wasn't until a wild soul entered the band that they truly exploded. 1974, in a noisy bar in Australia, where the air was thick with cigarette smoke, electric guitar riffs, and the clinking of glasses, a man walked into AC/DC's life. A former truck driver, a wandering singer who had played in countless small pubs. His name was Bon Scott. And his voice? It was like a raw, gut-wrenching scream straight from the heart. Bon wasn't just a singer. He was the embodiment of freedom and rebellion, of a time that anyone over 50 today surely remembers, the 70s. It was an era of long hair, endless road trips, summer nights with rock blasting from cassette players in garages or by the beach, hearts pounding to the rhythm of the drums. It was when Woodstock was still fresh in memory, when rock wasn't just music, it was how we fought back against the world. When Bon sang "It's a Long Way to the Top," people didn't just hear the music, they saw themselves in it. The struggle, the hunger to rise, the pride of never bowing down. And remember? When Highway to Hell blasted on the radio on a weekend night in 1979, maybe you were driving down the highway, windows rolled down, wind rushing through your hair, and the whole world felt like it was right beneath your feet. Bon brought something real, reckless humor, but also deep emotion. On stage, he didn't perform, he lived. Shirt off, drenched in sweat, screaming into the microphone like it was his last time singing. Every song was a story, a slice of life. And fans loved him for that, not because he was perfect, but because he was real. He was the kind of guy you'd meet at a bar after work, share a few jokes, clink glasses, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, he'd say something that left you speechless. That was Bon Scott. And then, tragedy struck. February 1980. A cold night in London. After a night of heavy drinking, Bon's friends helped him back to a car to sleep it off. No one knew it would be the last time he'd ever leave the stage lights behind. By morning, he was gone. He never woke up again. He was just 33 years old. His death left a hole in the hearts of fans, and in AC/DC itself, that could never truly be filled. We've lost a brother. Malcolm Young's voice fell, like a guitar note cut off mid-chord. The entire rock world stood still. No one could believe that a man so full of life had left so quietly. But in the hearts of millions, Bon Scott never died. His voice still echoes every time someone cranks up high voltage or shouts the first line of TNT. Bon was the scream of a generation that burned bright, lived with no regrets, and left behind an unforgettable mark. And even though he was gone, AC/DC didn't stop. Somehow, they found a way to rise again from the pain. When Bon Scott passed away, it felt like AC/DC's entire world had collapsed. But in the darkness of loss, they did the unthinkable. They stood up and turned pain into power. Nothing's gonna stop us, not even death. After Bon's sudden death, the band fell into silence. The guitars were set aside, the studio felt cold, and AC/DC's future was shrouded in grief. Many thought, they'll probably break up. How could they go on when the very heart of the band had just stopped beating? But in that moment, Malcolm and Angus Young made a choice that no one was sure of. They kept going. Sitting in a small room, staring at their dust-covered guitars, they asked themselves, can we really stop when Bon lived every second for music? Not because they wanted to replace him, but because they knew Bon would have been the first to tell them to get up and play again. And then they met Brian Johnson, a singer from England, a former mechanic, and a man Bon Scott himself had once described as a guy with a voice like thunder. Brian didn't try to imitate Bon. He brought a new energy, wild, powerful, and fearless. A different fire, but one that burned just as fiercely. Just months after Bon's death, AC/DC entered a studio in the Bahamas. In the sweltering heat, with grief still lingering in the air, they poured their sweat and their tears into creating one of the greatest rock albums of all time, Back in Black. When the opening guitar riff of Back in Black rang out, the world knew AC/DC was back. Not weaker, not broken, but stronger than ever. Back in Black / I hit the sack / I've been too long. I'm glad to be back. That song wasn't just a melody, it was a declaration of life. A statement that pain could never break the human spirit. And if you've ever lost someone, if you've ever walked through grief and found the strength to stand again, you'll feel every word of that song as if it were echoing straight from your own heart. Back in Black became legendary. Selling over 50 million copies worldwide, it became the second best-selling rock album in history, second only to Michael Jackson's Thriller. When it was released in 1980, it blasted from radios in California, filled bars in Texas, reminding the world that you can always rise after the storm. But more important than sales was how this album touched millions of lives, not just rock fans, but anyone who had ever been reborn from loss. AC/DC didn't just survive. They rose to the top, turning pain into power, and music into an immortal roar. But the peak wasn't the end. New challenges were still waiting ahead. We shook the world, and the world shook back. After Back in Black, AC/DC didn't just return, they dominated the world. The 80s and 90s became their golden era, their name echoing everywhere, from the dusty roads of Texas to massive stadiums in Europe, and even to the farthest fields of Russia. They weren't just a band anymore, they were a rock and roll empire. Back in Black was the beginning of it all. With over 50 million copies sold worldwide, it became the best-selling rock album of all time and the second best-selling album in music history, trailing only behind Michael Jackson's Thriller. In the US alone, it was certified 25 times platinum, a number most artists could only dream of. You Shook Me All Night Long and Hell's Bells weren't just hits, they were anthems, blasted through radios, car speakers, and party speakers across an entire decade. But that was just the start. For those about to rock, We Salute You, 1981, pushed them even higher, becoming AC/DC's first album to hit #1 on the Billboard 200 in the US. The title track, with its thunderous cannon blast closing every live show, turned them into an unstoppable force. The album's tour raked in tens of millions of dollars, selling out nights from New York to London. And their shows? Forget the small bars of their early days. AC/DC were now shaking the entire planet. In 1991, at the Monsters of Rock Festival in Moscow, they played to over 1.6 million people, one of the largest concerts in history, marking the first time Western rock truly reached Russia after the Cold War. Or take 2009, when they played 3 sold-out nights at River Plate Stadium in Argentina, with 200,000 screaming fans whose voices overpowered the speakers, captured forever and live at River Plate, one of their best-selling live recordings. And the money? They made mountains of it. The Black Ice Tour, 2008, minus 2010, grossed $441 million, making it the fourth highest-grossing tour of all time at the time. In total, AC/DC has sold over 200 million albums worldwide, cementing them as one of the best-selling artists in history. In the US alone, they've sold over 83 million records, surpassing even the Rolling Stones and Aerosmith. The awards kept piling up. In 2003, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, solidifying their legendary status. Their first Grammy came in 2010, with War Machine winning Best Hard Rock Performance. In Australia, they've racked up multiple ARIA awards, including Best Rock Album and highest-selling album for Black Ice in 2009. Not to mention Thunderstruck, the explosive opener of the Razor's Edge, 1990, which has gone 10 times platinum in Australia and remains one of the most streamed rock songs ever, over 1 billion streams on Spotify to date. At their peak, AC/DC was a global phenomenon. They played at the 1991 Rugby World Cup final at Wembley, shared the stage with the Rolling Stones at the SARS benefit concert in Toronto, 2003, in front of 450,000 people, the largest paid music event in Canadian history. They even have a street named after them, Calle de AC/DC in Spain. And in 2023, Australia minted a commemorative coin to honor their 50-year legacy. But what fans remember most isn't the numbers or the awards. It's the image of Angus Young thrashing wildly in his schoolboy uniform, sweat pouring like rain, Malcolm Young in the background, striking each chord with razor-sharp precision, and Brian Johnson, screaming lyrics that made you feel like you could take on the entire world. That was AC/DC at their peak, not just shaking the stage, but shaking your entire life. After the glory of Back in Black, AC/DC entered their golden age. But as anyone who has reached the summit knows, the strongest winds blow at the top. Even the strongest must weather the storm. Success came in waves, sold-out shows, albums topping the charts, bands roaring from Los Angeles to London. AC/DC had become a global icon. But behind the scenes, life was far from easy. Malcolm Young, co-founder, the silent heartbeat of the band, began fighting a battle that had no stage lights, no applause, but was just as brutal: alcohol addiction. In the 80s, he quietly stepped away from the spotlight to enter rehab, a painful but necessary choice. During those days, Malcolm stayed far from the crowds, sitting alone in a small room, his hands shaking too much to hold his guitar. No one saw the sweat or the tears, but those closest to him knew he was fighting to keep himself together. And it wasn't just the band that paid the price, so did the fans. In 1991, at a concert in Salt Lake City, the crowd's energy spiraled out of control. The air grew stifling, bodies pressed too tightly together, and 3 young fans never made it home that night. 3 names. 3 shattered families. For a band that had always played with their hearts, the tragedy was devastating. Angus Young once said he felt like their music had been stained with blood, but they had to keep going, because it was the only way to heal. They never forgot. From that day forward, every time they stepped on stage, they carried not just their music, but their responsibility. Fame is a double-edged sword. Months-long tours across the United States, sleeping on buses, grabbing burgers between shows. The bright stage lights were dazzling, but the exhaustion was bone-deep. Like so many hard-working Americans, they pushed themselves to the limit, not just for passion, but for the people they loved. for what they believed in. Yes, they were rock stars, but they were also men who sometimes collapsed onto backstage tables from sheer exhaustion. There were moments when they wondered, are we really living, or just running? And that became one of life's hardest lessons. Success comes at a cost. Not just in time or energy, but in scars, sacrifices, and silent wounds that no one sees. AC/DC didn't just survive success. They survived loss, guilt, and the kind of sorrow only those who have lived long enough can understand. But the storms they had weathered so far were only the beginning. Life still had greater losses in store for them. You can lose everything, but not the fire within. Since 2014, fans began to notice Malcolm Young growing quieter, his presence on stage fading. Then came the heartbreaking truth. Malcolm was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, a disease that slowly erased everything, even his ability to play the guitar that had once been an extension of his body. Imagine it, a man who had ignited millions of fans, now sitting in silence, watching the world drift by in a fog of fading memories. A genius who created legendary riffs like High Voltage and Thunderstruck, now struggling to recall the melodies he himself had written. In 2017, Malcolm passed away. And Angus Young lost not just his brother, but his lifelong musical partner. No more familiar glances exchanged on stage. No more synchronized riffs. Just a void, silent and heavy, like a song that never reached its chorus. It was like losing a limb, Angus once said. And it was. Losing someone who had been by your side from childhood to the peak of your life. It feels like losing a piece of your own soul. But life wasn't done taking. Not long after, another blow struck. Brian Johnson, the powerhouse voice who had lifted AC/DC from the ashes after Bon Scott's death, was forced to leave the band in 2016. The reason? Severe hearing loss, a death sentence for a rock singer. Brian recalled the doctor's warning. If you keep singing, you will go completely deaf. And so, the man who once belted Hell's Bells so fiercely it shook entire stadiums, was forced into silence. It was a decision no musician ever wants to make, but he did it out of responsibility, out of respect for the music, and for those who had always believed in him. Yet through all the loss, one man remained standing: Angus Young. 60 years old. The same schoolboy uniform. The same relentless energy on stage. Still pounding out chords like time had never touched him. That image stops you in your tracks. Not just because of his skill or stamina, but because it represents millions of people out there. The ones who still go to work after a funeral. The ones who keep taking care of their families, even when their hearts are breaking. The ones who keep smiling, even after losing everything that once held them up. Because they understand as long as the fire inside still burns, they are still alive. Life is fragile. That's not just philosophy, it's something we've all felt. We don't know how many more times we'll hear our favorite song, say I love you to our parents, or simply sit quietly under the evening sky. But it's that very fragility that makes every moment precious. And when we watch AC/DC push through loss, when we see Angus still standing, not for money, not for fame, but for the undying love of music, we realize something. Age doesn't kill passion. Hardship doesn't extinguish resilience. And time will never erase the spirit of those who refuse to back down. AC/DC is music. But more than that, they are a living testament to the power of faith, brotherhood, and unwavering perseverance. No matter what time takes away, if we hold on to the fire within, it will burn forever. Time may take many things, memories, health, loved ones, but there is one thing it can never steal: the melodies that live on through the years. Rock may grow old, but it never dies. More than half a century has passed since two young boys from the Young family first picked up their guitars in Australia. And today, AC/DC may no longer be on stage every night, but that sound, that spirit, still beats in the hearts of millions. In 2020, in the middle of a global pandemic, when the world fell silent and countless hearts felt isolated, they released Power Up. When Shot in the Dark dropped, it didn't just top the rock charts in the US. It made lifelong fans pick up their phones and call old friends, just to say, "Have you heard it? They're still as great as ever." It was a message that needed no flowery words. We are still here. Rock is still alive. And the fire in us has never gone out. For many, hearing Shot in the Dark brought tears, not just because the music was incredible, but because it awakened a part of their youth that still lived inside them. Do you remember that first time you heard Back in Black in an old Mustang? That night you and your friends shouted "You Shook Me" all night long at the town bar. Or maybe just a lazy Sunday afternoon, grilling in the backyard, thunderstruck blasting as your kids laughed in the background. Those memories don't fade. They stay with you and with AC/DC. And the most beautiful thing? This music doesn't stop with one generation. It passes on to the kids, to the grandkids. The next generation doesn't just listen to AC/DC. They sing along, they share, they feel it just as deeply as their parents and grandparents once did. Have you ever seen a 12-year-old wearing headphones, headbanging to Highway to Hell? Maybe you smiled, because you knew. This music is a bridge, an invisible thread pulling families closer, connecting them through drum beats, guitar riffs, and lyrics that seem simple, yet hit as hard as life itself. AC/DC isn't just a band. They are a part of memory. They are the companions who have walked with you through every phase, from reckless youth, to the chaos of adulthood, to the quieter moments of reflection. They are proof that you can live fully, love wholeheartedly, fall again and again, but still leave behind a mark, not perfect, but real and deep. AC/DC never needed to say much. Their music said it all. And maybe the greatest thing of all is this: every time you press play on an AC/DC song, you're not just listening to music. You're reliving the best moments of your life. And who knows, you might just be passing that fire on to the next generation. So next time you play AC/DC, close your eyes. Let the memories take you back.